in a way, that whole story for me is is the story of Yosef in many ways, because Yosef always unconditionally was looking just to help, no matter what. He didn't care. There was no conditions. He was never thinking, okay, I'm gonna get this, or only if the country does so and so, then I'll serve, or whatever. He was just there to do what needs to be done to protect anyone who he can protect. And Kfar Aza, he went down, he protected.
You're not really in the podcast space until you have a technical malfunction. So glad I had my first technical malfunction with a great fellow such as Osher. And you get a second shot at things. So we talked for a little bit yesterday. And as I was thinking about our conversation, I wanted to redo the introduction. So, Osher, how would you introduce yourself?
Um, 31, live in Jerusalem, grew up in Beit Shemesh. English speaking from kind of birth, since my parents are American and British, but Israeli, fully Israeli, born here, raised here. Um, Other than that, I like working out. Been to the army, computer science, studied my master's here in Hebrew. Um, in this context, obviously, brother of Yosef Guedalia, my younger brother, who was killed on October 7th. He was a soldier in Divan, fighting. He was 3.5 years in the army. He was in Keva, and now part of the Gvura Forum of the families of the fallen soldiers, that puts to our main focus to make sure this war ends the way our family members who fought and died in this war intended in this war ending.
I first want to touch on Yosef before October 7th. Can you go into a little bit about what motivated him and what he was interested in aside from being a drone operator in Duvdevan?
Yeah, so me and him grew up very close. Our whole family were pretty close, and our cousins live in our street. We're that kind of family. We don't really have, at least I didn't really have that many, friends outside of my family. So we really became best friends, me and Yosef, and 7 years younger. So I was the one, to whatever I was doing, who was always looking up and trying to follow the footsteps. So I went to the Mechina in AD. I was there for a year and a bit. I drafted to the army. He later on followed, went to the same Mechina, went through the same kind of training, also trying to get to an elite unit, and ended up going to Divan. He's the most similar person to me in the world in many ways. Not only just looks and DNA, but also values and beliefs, and there's nothing we really would disagree on. Of course, I learned from him a lot. He learned from me a lot. Personalities differed, but very similar life views, and that's what built the incredible partnership and connection and everything. He was, yes, a drone operator in Duvdevan. He loves what he was doing. He loves the country, Am Yisrael. He always would also keep a book in his pocket. He was studying Torah whenever he had extra time.
Is that common in
He
Duvdevan? Is it a religious unit for those who don't know?
So it's relatively religious, you could say. In the last few years, I think more or less 50% of the soldiers there are religious or in some way or another. Yeah, it's not like they give them time specifically to study or whatever, but he just find the time whenever he had it. And the environment is an environment of soldiers who want to push themselves, who want to do the right thing, who want to give what they can, and are willing to give themselves for the safety of the country and their families and nation. And he was out there almost every night operating. At some point, they realized that. So again, he got to the drone subunit, and he kind of became this high tech. In a way, like half-time high-tech employee. He'd go to Tel Aviv to meetings with drone companies, drone startups, And that's also, by the way, how we have all these pretty amazing photo shoots of him with these new drones. And he tell them, okay, I have this and this issue. I need the GPS to be a little better. The indoor drone has this and this problem, and whatever. He'd go out with them, and they train together, and he'd bring them even to our house in Beit Shemesh and try out the new drones, whatever. He was like a pioneer in a lot of what he was doing there, and
And how widely adopted were those drones before October 7th?
they were the first to do a lot of things. There's a picture, and this is part of his personality, also just not being the show off type and not looking for any credit. But the pictures that we're getting after, so one of them is him with General Kurilla, right? Is that how you pronounce his name from CENTCOM? Explaining to him about some drone. And I could send you that picture after. And there's the picture of him with Aviv Kochavi, who was the previous Ramatkal, who Yosef was also instructing about some drones. So they were really the first to use specific drones, and he was the first to develop them. And now they're pretty widespread. But he led many days. He put together a day, I think a yearly kind of thing, where they'd meet up all the different drone operators from the army and talk tech and what they have and what they've been using. So they were really ahead of the game back then, and he always loved drones. That's a funny thing, He had on his wall hung up all these pictures of airplanes and fighter jets, and he was like, "I want to be a pilot." That's when he was like 10 or 15. He did the different screening processes. At some point, he fell out, and he couldn't be a pilot, but he always loved drones, and
Well,
he
now it's the closest thing,
yeah, but we're talking about like 10 years ago at least.
right?
He already had it. He bought a drone and he convinced my little brother Charlie to buy a drone with him. And he just fly the drone all over wherever he can. And then he just became a drone operator, and it was all kind of natural and came together.
I wish that he had been in charge before October 7th. As we know, the lookout women who were on the border with Gaza, at least 40% of the larger drones weren't even functional that day. And they didn't have, they, some of the cameras were so old that the pieces are not even being manufactured. So they couldn't even replace them.
Wow.
And another mother actually told the forum that was established, the Civilian Inquiry, that her son would come home and order pieces off of AliExpress because they couldn't get the pieces. So I wish that Yosef had been in charge of this portfolio. I think that we would be in a very different situation right
Yeah,
now.
when it came to responsibility, he always was the person you can trust. We saw what his friends wrote about him in the Tironut in the basic training. So I'm assuming everyone writes about every other soldier, how they feel about them, so that the commanders can get a better understanding of who the soldiers actually are behind the scenes. And every single line, one after the other, was Yosef is the number one person you can trust, the best friend, always will put the team before himself. And that's part of why he was chosen to take this subunit, which was now really functional, and turn it to what it became. So they ended up doing over 100 operations. They every single operation they went on, they were able to come back safely and make sure everyone else that went out was safe. There was one operation where there weren't enough drone operators, and someone actually got injured in that in that operation, and they really understood. Okay, we're not going to any operations without the drone guys, and he ended up going, yeah, almost every night, and he was married and everything, and he didn't really mind. He knew his responsibility. His friends, some of them are like, Yosef, you're working us too hard. We need to rest also a little bit. It's too much. And he'd say, look, who's going to take responsibility if something happens to someone, or if we don't catch someone that needs to get caught, or if someone gets injured, because there's no one to look out on the roofs for snipers, or to make sure the exit routes are clear, or the indoor drones for if a terrorist is hiding in one of the rooms. All those things they're doing. They're making sure it's like the number one safety measure. So
Now we see that that's been adopted pretty widely, at least conceptually, in the IDF after October 7th. Obviously, it's not foolproof. I was actually talking to a soldier who informed his command that there were different signals that the room is probably booby trapped, but he was overruled, and someone actually fell in that operation. So even when you have the proper drones, there are still human mistakes and things like that. But at least now there's a better chance, and we're working to get it. It still might be about 90% donations in the field, um, but at least there's an awareness about it, and there's not
Yeah,
a discussion about whether or not it's needed. You see that people see the human life that can be saved, and I
for
think that
sure.
Yosef's contribution there, from what you're saying, is huge to the future battle plans of the state of Israel, which is quite amazing. October 7th, where was Yosef and what was his reaction when everything started?
On October 7th, we were all in Jerusalem. We all the married, we're seven kids, five of us married, living in Jerusalem. And we had a family prayer we do every Simchat Torah. This year was at my uncle's house. And we were supposed to meet, me and him there. We actually played basketball October 6th together in Beit Shemesh, as we did almost every Friday. And
Who was the better basketball player?
so he actually was a very good mid-range shooter. I'd always, like, driving was always my thing. Um, Yeah, so the funny thing is that October 6th, so we're playing basketball and we're part of the Beit Shemesh team that we decided to join like 3 4 months earlier. We're like, let's join the basketball team. Okay, let's do it. And then we both just decided we're driving from Jerusalem to Beit Shemesh and joining our team, and we're gonna put Beit Shemesh back on the map or whatever. Anyways, he used to play on that team when he was younger, and I never played on a team. I just played like in school, whatever. But I wasn't getting any minutes that game, and he was playing. So at the end of the game, that game actually on October 6th, I told him, "Look, I'm not getting any minutes. Let's join the team in Jerusalem. We'll show them what it is. We'll be because like the coach didn't really know me." And then he was Sinai said after his wife. She said Yosef was like upset about that. That like you weren't getting minutes, and we wanted to play together and whatever. So I
I could
actually
tell he's
told.
definitely better than you because an older brother, if you were better than him, you would have really rubbed it in right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
possible. The truth is,
that's
I
the
didn't
that's
play
the older
basketball.
that's the older brother way of saying he was better than me. I love it.
Yeah. I didn't
Okay,
play basketball since, and I'm not planning to. I want to keep it always that way. The final basketball game, as for now, till he comes back, then we'll play again. But anyway, so October
really?
7th, we're
That's how you, wait. You so closely associate that pickup game that you or that league, you can't go
for
back.
sure like also frisbee. We played frisbee, ultimate frisbee, every single Friday, almost every single Friday. It was either basketball or frisbee or both. And both of them, like to me, was an easy decision. I'm not touching a frisbee anymore, not touching a basketball anymore. Like that, I'm leaving with him. I'm not moving on. You can call it that way. So, anyways, October 7th, we are in supposed to go to this prayer, and we spoke on while we were playing and after. So he was actually supposed to have an operation scheduled at 1 p.m. So I knew, okay, at 1 p.m. he's leaving, but in the morning I'm supposed to see him. Turns out, obviously, at like 8:20, there was the sirens, and I don't make it because I head down to my reserve service, and he also gets called up. He's actually told just to be on alert, whatever, but he understands there's no reason for him to wait for anyone to tell him to come. He just went already a little earlier, and which was obviously a smart decision. He gets there. They have four armed vehicles waited like just about leaving, and he manages to hop on with his partner, and they get down south to Kfar Aza. That's where Duvdevan were placed, and in Kfar Aza. So right before he puts up the drone, and he tells everyone, okay, with the drone, we're going to see what's happening. That's how we communicate, because the drone operators, they join always different teams. So he does this kind of briefing before, and then they get into Kfar Aza, and as they get in
Wait one
there,
second. I just want to ask a question because for those of you who tune in to the Mail Time podcast, we talk about somewhat equipment and military strategy a little bit more in depth than like a broader thing. So I want to know, did he encounter any terrorists on the way down to Kfar Aza? Because obviously it was already a little bit dicey.
right, so
Did
we're
he?
talking around, I think 11, if I'm not mistaken, is when they arrive at Kfar Aza. It could be 11:30, could be 10:30, but more or less. And from the stories I heard, they've seen bodies and whatever on the way. They knew what they're getting into, but they haven't seen like terrorists on the roads. So when they reach Kfar Aza, It's the first place that they meet the terrorists
Because he
from.
was in Keva, his equipment was already ready because he's usually
Yeah, yeah.
going
He was supposed to
on.
go out to an operation 4 hours later. Like he was, anyways. So his gun was ready. And yeah, they get down there and they get rattled with bullets. So already there's soldiers killed from Duvdevan and killed from different units already fighting there since 9, 10. So they're joining in and trying to rescue as many people as they can. And obviously,
I want to ask one technical question though. How does it work joining in? Because obviously there was a lot of people who went down there who didn't have any equipment and didn't have, say, a communication set. Do you
yeah.
know about
Look, I can
how
tell you
that
from
was
my
working?
perspective because I don't know exactly the details of how every different force did it, but you had people that just took their personal, their pistol, whatever, went down, tried to fight. The army usually, when it comes, so I know from my perspective, you see the people out, you communicate, you get out the vehicle, you talk, you understand, okay, who's here, what's happening, where's the enemy, friendlies, whatever. And then you become the one in charge of the situation, and they can either help out or take a step back and go to the next place that they feel relevant. So those were like situations we encountered, but I don't know exactly how it was for them. I believe since Duvdevan decided to, if I understand correctly, just take Faraz as their project, and they really, so I think their whole unit was involved and their command was involved in organizing the battle over there. So I'm sure at the beginning there's the Kitat Konenut. You have to understand where they are, yeah, who's alive, who's dead, where. The minute that kind of gets out the way, then okay, the army's here. The army's starting to take control. Everyone else step back or help in a way that you're helping more than you're bothering. So, so they get to Kfar Aza, they're rattled with bullets. They get out the vehicles. They secure whatever areas they're told to, and they take out the injured, the dead, and they continue fighting. At around 1, they already reach the middle of the kibbutz, and at this point they cross paths with a policeman who had a body cam on him, and he was there since like 3 hours earlier already in Kfar Aza, and he was fighting with another one of his friends who was shot in the chest and laying there wounded, critically injured, like really minutes before he was completely dead. 2 shots in the chest, and you can see this in the body cam of the policeman. You see how Yosef gets out the vehicle. He carries him into back in. He makes sure he's okay. He checks his pulse. All this is on video, and they take him out of Kfar Aza. They also take out another civilian who's in his mamad, in his safe room, and they head back in. And that's like the last picture we have of him,
Can I
which
ask
is,
you?
what do
Sorry,
you say?
I just want to know when you see that camera, what do you see? When you see that video, what do you see in his eyes?
Um, yeah, he's just very focused. He just looks like he's like, I know it's serious. Yosef, he a lot of times is more playful. He's always fun, laughing. He never really takes things seriously. He doesn't get upset ever. It's really hard. I don't think I can't imagine him really upset, but like serious. He needs to do now something, and he understands that this is not a joke. So you can see in his eyes that he's just focused, and it's all about every minute you can save another person. It's very
Did he look scared?
no. It's hard to see. Like you can't really see fear because you just see someone who's doing a intense intense job. Intensity maybe is what you see in the eyes. I don't know. You can see the video also for yourself and tell me if you see something. But
Well,
you
look,
maybe
it's different when you're
right. You maybe
someone
have to know
observing a
him.
camera versus knowing the person. That's why
Yeah.
I was only asking because there's even people that were in the army for many, many years. There's a lot of people who never fired their gun. There's a lot of people who might
Right.
have been in different units, but they're still not used to a mass casualty event in which there's RPGs flying and bullets flying and a dead person. I've
Yeah.
spoken to a number of soldiers. It's the first time they ever saw a dead body. So I was
Yeah.
curious
No,
if
it's a
there's
good
anything that stood
question.
out.
I think I think what Sinai says that she sees in his eyes is, he knows things are not okay. It's like usually, and also my dad said that about when he was with him in the prayer in the morning, and then Yosef said he has to go down south. He said that every time Yosef would always leave or have to go somewhere, it would always kind of be in a half a smile, or everything's okay. And this time when he left, he really wasn't projecting that everything's okay. And also in that video, you kind of see it. His eyes are like saying, yeah, not everything is okay, and not everything is going to be okay. And I think that's kind of, I don't know, you can kind of see that. But he was in crossfire before. He's been shot at before, so I don't think anything surprised him too much about being in a real war zone. Obviously, the circumstances were, I didn't feel like anything surprised me too much about that, but obviously the situation was a situation I don't think anyone has ever seen. Maybe in some tribes in Africa you can see this kind of case, but other than that, hard to believe.
Okay, so he gets in. It's around 1 o'clock.
Right. So he gets in, he takes him out, and that's the last picture we have of him carrying him out. And they get back in the vehicles, they head back in, and this time they go to the Shchunat Dor Tzair. It's the younger area where the terrorists broke in from. And that area is infested with terrorists. That's like completely under Hamas control since the morning. IDF is just starting kind of to get there in different points, but it's really just full of terrorists swarming. And they're in their Davidim, they're in their vehicles, and they're shooting out through the shooting holes. And they're surprising terrorists and shooting at them from point blank range. But at some point, they make this turn around one of the houses, and now they're standing between the fence and the last house in the kibbutz. And they look towards that house, and they see a terrorist with an RPG, fires at them from 5 meters away, and they get hit, and the car almost flips over, but it doesn't, and it starts burning from the inside. But they manage to get out, and two of them, the two front guys, the driver and his buddy, they get in front of the vehicle, between the house and the vehicle, and then Yosef and his partner get behind, and then they're shot at, and there's grenades thrown at them, and there's a whole scene. And at some point, at the second grenade, Yosef sees the grenade, he shouts grenade, and he goes to take cover towards the fence, towards the where the terrorists came from. But right now they're shooting at him from the other side, from the houses. And he runs to the fence, and then his team loses contact with him. Later on, his commander is also shot by a sniper a few minutes later, and they're left only two guys out of the four. And these four guys were just driving around alone. Like, they weren't waiting for any senior commander to come and tell them what to do. They were just in Kfar Aza, they had guns, they had a vehicle, and they knew, okay, it's up to us now to just go in and not care about anything, not stop. And it kind of a suicide mission, if you think about it. But they just went in and didn't stop for anything. And he found himself at the fence, faced with terrorists, and that's where he falls, and his team actually is not able to see it. Only his commander most probably sees it because he shouts something about that, but then he also gets shot, so they don't really know where he is. And only 2 hours later, after they send a drone and they scan the area, they send a Mael, it's like an APC, and they're able to run over the terrorists over there that are trying to kidnap his body, and they manage to recognize him thanks to the tzitzit that he was wearing, and they recover him, but he's already shot, lying there for a few hours. He was probably killed right away.
Where were you when you found out what happened?
So, yeah, I was in so many places because I found out so many times. Just it went from where is he to, okay, I don't think anything good happened to him, to, okay, I need a miracle to happen, to please let a miracle happen. And this was all throughout like 24 to 36 hours of me trying to figure out where he is while I myself am in reserve, and we're moving around, and I'm just trying not to think about it because there's nothing I can do about it anyway. I'm in a different position, and at some point my cousin, who was also in Duvdevan in reserves, So I told him just get there and try to figure out what's happening. And of course, now that I look back, he probably knew pretty much right away. But they were waiting until they could tell the families because they had to identify the body, whatever. So it was kind of they were all dragging me out. At some point, I just knew that he's not alive, sitting well somewhere, just waiting. He's either critically injured, kidnapped, or killed. Also critically injured now, I would be able to say he wasn't because then they would tell us right away. So I would just told him, look, I don't know what to do. I can wait here until my dad calls me and tells me to come home, or you can tell me when you're going to my house and I'll come with you. And in the end, I managed to convince them to do that. And I met them over there at the entrance to my parents' house, and then that's when that's when I knew for the first time that he wasn't kidnapped and that he was killed. And I have to say, um, there is a relief in hearing he's not kidnapped or his body's not kidnapped, and that they managed to bring back his body.
When was that? That was the same
That
day,
was Monday night.
Monday night. Okay, so
Yeah,
October 9th.
yeah.
What's it like being, I don't want to say normal because your family is special and very talented family. What's it like being private and then all of a sudden being thrust into this national spotlight as a prominent soldier that fell with a beautiful face, a young widow, Sinai. What's
Yeah.
that like all of a sudden just having everything turned upside
So,
down?
I think first of all, it's so different. I feel than many other cases because it's not one soldier. It's not 10. It's not 20. It's 1,000 plus people in a day. Like most of the country, most of the days you'd be able to have at least a news spotlight or hey, this is the name. Here's the face. On the day that he fell, there was probably 50 faces that came out to the news, every day, and I think the spotlight didn't even really exist, um, and also until now, there's just so many of us. We talk to each other, we're friends of the families, and the main thing is I just feel like if until this happened, we all have responsibility to do what we can in order to make sure these things don't happen. Then now I just feel like I don't have the right to not do whatever I can after what I experienced because it's just too much and it's too powerful to just let it go by.
I'm going to tell you that you're not just any other brother. Your Yosef was not just any other soldier in terms of the attention and how people are motivated by his tremendous legacy. Yosef is known across the United States, and people really do know his face and have been inspired by what he's doing. So, as much as perhaps it provides, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of quote unquote competition for attention, unfortunately, because there's so many unbelievable people that fell that day. Yosef really does stand out, and it could be that I'm from Newton, Massachusetts, and I knew Sinai back when she was in middle school, but I think it's deeper than that. I think that it really is that his legacy really does stand out.
Yeah, I'm sure it is in a way. Like one of the things that was going through my head when I figured out and I was waiting for them to tell me was just that no one that is ever going to understand. Like this is too bad. This is way, way, way worse than anything that can possibly happen. And the worst thing about it is that no one will ever, ever understand. Like no matter how much you explain, no matter even if they lost a brother, and I'll say that, and I'll never understand also them. Okay, that's fair, but no one will ever understand what for me what it is, and from what I knew of him, and yeah, I'm sure also Sinai knows, and other people that were close to him know, but that's it. And as much as we talk, and as much as we try to tell us a little bit of stories and whatever, it's all whoever got to know him, and you know, I think you can still do a lot with sharing.
Absolutely. Have you found that people don't know what to say to you when you're talking about this? Because I'll tell you, the first time I saw Sinai after this happened, I didn't mention anything because my assumption was that everybody's going to say something and perhaps she wants to have a normal conversation. So I kind of rolled the dice and I didn't say anything, spoke to her. It was really nice to see her. But I then felt badly that I didn't say anything, but I'm not sure if that was the right thing or the wrong thing.
Yeah.
What is your,
So for
what's it
sure,
been for you?
I don't think it's the wrong thing. At least, okay, I'll talk for myself. And for what I feel like I know from other people, I don't think it's the wrong because you're all day. It's always in your mind. You don't need someone else to feel sorry for you. You don't need anyone to sympathize for you. You don't. I don't know. At least I don't feel like I need that. Maybe some people do, but just to have a conversation that you cannot talk about it is obviously nice, and just don't expect the other person to just act as if everything's normal, of course. But other than that, yeah, like if they bring it up, they'll bring it up, and then you can have the conversation. And if not, then maybe they're happy just to not talk about that for a little bit. So yeah.
What are you doing now with the forum and what is the goal of what you're advocating for?
Like I wouldn't say I'm not part of the so there's the CEO of the forum and there's the ones that are really involved full time in this, and I mainly just try to join in wherever I can. I'm still working. I'm still just managing my family and everything normal. But whenever I can do something, I obviously try to do it. So the last things we've done is meetings with Israel Katz, the defense minister, or some others, and we're just putting out there the very basic, straightforward saying where we can let this war end without a victory, without finishing the objectives that you set, that the country set. Because these soldiers went out, they gave up their lives, they left at home wives and children and everything, and they risked their lives just in order for this thing to end, for once and for all, for us to win this war. This war has been going on for way longer than it needs to. It's not a 1.5 year war, it's a 30-year war at least. And it's time to just finish it in Gaza. We should never have another Gaza war.
What do you say to the families of hostages who say that Israel has to be prepared to sacrifice whatever it takes to get their loved one home safely?
Yeah, so this comes up a lot, and I've spoken about this also in different areas. And I think, first of all, when someone whose family member is a hostage, you can understand where they're coming from. Um, but at the same time, when you're making big decisions with life on the line, you have to be rational and you have to make sure that you're doing the right thing. And that's why the conversations with people who say at any cost or whatever it is, you must give it, it's meaningless emotional conversations which are just they're not realistic. You can never negotiate anything without a red line. You wouldn't give up Tel Aviv to Hamas in order to get back the hostages. I don't think anyone would. So of course they have a red line too. They're just not saying it. And then once you have a red line, then you have to draw it somewhere. So I talk to them. I'd say, okay, where do you draw the red line? Would you give back every single terrorist that sits in the jails? Would you let them create a Hamas state in Gaza and promise not to attack them with American promises and for 20 years? Would you let them dig more? Like where does the line cross? And I'm sure at some point they'd say, you know what, here the line crossed. And I'd say, okay, you know what, you could think that. I think the line crosses here and then I'd give them my reasons. So I think once you have that conversation, it's much healthier.
Well,
When it
I
comes
just want to say
to,
we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but now that our technical difficulties wiped that out, you are in a position, whether it's right or wrong, you're in a position unlike many, many, many other people, which is as a member of a bereaved family and the brother of a fallen hero, you're allowed to have that conversation. Whether it's right or wrong, in the discourse now, there isn't really a space for that because if someone were to give a perspective that it's not the right thing to do to if someone were to critique the position that a hostage family is making to the president of the United States, but you are not a bereaved family or a family member of someone who's held hostage, it's seen as insensitive.
Yeah. Again, obviously, I don't agree with that. I think if I'd go back 10 years, it's my duty and my responsibility to say the same thing about the Shalit deal, which ended up being a horrible deal. Even though at that point I wasn't a bereaved family, that was me over there needing to step up for my brother and save his life, which I didn't do, and the other 1,000 plus who were murdered and killed. So just because you're bereaved or not, it doesn't make give you the position to say what's right or what's wrong. You have the duty to do what's right and to say what's right, no matter who you are. And anyone can have this conversation, and everyone has the right to have this conversation, and no one can be shut down or canceled because they have less skin in the game. You have to say what's right, even if you have less skin or more skin or whatever it is. Now you have to not be a hypocrite, right? That is obviously important. So if you're just going to say something because it's easy to talk when you don't have a family member there, then ask yourself very, very well. Ask yourself, if I had a family member there, what would I do? What would I say? How would I act? And if you're talking now in a way that's different than how you would act or say, then just don't talk at all, because you're not a real you're not having a real conversation here.
So if Yosef was held hostage,
Yeah, I want to believe that I'd have the exact same position, 100%. And by the way, you see this, yeah, Forum Atikva, which has a different position than the Forum of the Mishpachat HaChatufim. And the Forum Atikva, their whole strategy, what they'd give up, where their red lines go, is very different. And you can see that they stand for it. And I believe I'd be part of Forum Atikva if I'd be in
what do
that
you think the
position.
split is in terms of the representation? Because with the fake news media and people trying to portray things in a certain way, it's really hard to tell. And I'll offer one example. If you were to just read the New York Times, even the Wall Street Journal, Times of Israel, you would think that Bibi Netanyahu is hated by 98% of the country and is about to be led away in handcuffs. But every single Shabbat table that I've sat at with Israelis across the political spectrum, if you ask them, okay, who would you vote for if you had a vote today? 8 out of 10 are saying Bibi Netanyahu. So you can't even really get a
Yeah,
good
so
sense of.
it's a good point. What you see in the news and the reality are very different. And I wouldn't go as far to say 8 out of 10 from what I meet people and talk to people. There's definitely many people here that don't like Bibi, and there's definitely many that do. And I think more or less, if there were elections now, you'd probably get more or less the same numbers he got before. So he kind of managed right after the war. I think people kind of lost
Let,
confidence
let
in
me
him,
let me
and
let me clarify. It's that if you were to ask them, is there someone better, or is there something that you would want from a different person, and they struggle with that answer, and it ends up largely coming back to the status quo. But I'm asking from the perspective of the hostage forum, where do you think it splits
right.
their interactions?
So yeah, I'd say I would definitely put my money that most of the Israelis see what the hostage forum is doing and understands that they're really hurting themselves, with protesting against our government and pressuring and trying to pressure our government into deals. And um, yeah, it's sad to see, because common sense, you don't need more than that. People say, oh, there's this in this article that came out, or this, Sinwar's letter that came out. You don't even need that. You just need common sense when you're trying to negotiate a deal. And then you're pressuring one side and saying, you better do it or else whatever. And the other side hears that, then they're just going to make the price higher because they think they can get more out of it. So the strategy should be, like Trump is saying now, all hell will break loose if you don't release the hostages by the time I come in. And the strategy of the families towards Biden should have been, you are the most powerful person in the world. There are American hostages in Gaza. You're not doing enough to bring them back. You care more about the Islamist sympathizers in your country than you actually care about the American hostages in Gaza who were kidnapped by a vile terrorist group, and you're not doing anything about it. You're trying to stay on good condition with Qatar when they're funding terrorists. They funded this kidnapping. So if they'd go and do this, I believe, and protest and make noise about it, I believe that we'd be seeing a deal already happen. Very possible. Because Hamas would say, okay, look, if we don't do a deal now with whatever conditions they've given us, Biden is going to lose patience, and he knows that the whole forum of hostages' families is all against him, and he's going to do. The thing about Israel is when Hamas sees them doing that to Bibi, then Hamas does the exact opposite. They say, okay, we might as well hold, because if we do this deal now, we lose the opportunity to wait a little longer until Bibi breaks and gives us even more than we want. So the whole strategy is completely messed up, and the only reason this is happening is because there are people, I'm not going to say it's the hostage families, because I think that really they only care about their family members, but there are people who care more about Bibi leaving than about the hostages coming back. And I'm not going to say it's a majority, I'm not going to point at any specific person, but there's no other explanation for why they'd be doing such terrible strategy for. There's only one reason, because the outcome they want is not the outcome of getting the hostages back on any condition, even the condition of Bibi staying.
I'll never forget, there was an Israeli Knesset member that was in New York for Shabbat, and some of the leftist organizers who happened to be the same organizers of the hostage forum in New York were actually encouraging people to have a picket fence in protest the Knesset member going to Shul to speak. And when I saw that, it was extremely concerning, and I was frankly confused how anyone would think that that's an appropriate thing to do if we can agree that most everyone is on the same side, and you might agree or disagree on a specific position, but people are trying to get the hostages home, and it's just crazy to me that Israelis on foreign soil would be protesting elected members of Knesset. It's just really crazy to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not nice to see. I think at home, in closed doors, you shouldn't fight, you should argue, you should stand for what you believe in. But there's no benefit in going out and taking out the dirty trash and letting everyone. It just brings weakness. And I think you can see, let's say Naftali Bennett, who's doing a very, in my opinion, good job with this. I'm not a Bennett fan after what he did last time, but it's very nice to see that whenever he's interviewed to international news, he always stands very strongly with Israel. He doesn't criticize at home. And that's how it should be from all sides, no matter who it is. At home, fight, but when you go out, then stand together and stand strong. Otherwise, we're just always losing.
When you think back to the leadership before October 7th, are you angry?
Yeah, again, I'm more angry after October 7th when certain things aren't fixed than before. Because before it's like, look, this is what we thought, this is what we said. Am Yisrael wasn't there. We didn't understand as a nation. We did Girush Katif. We took out Israeli settlements from Gaza. As a nation, we didn't pressure our country, our prime ministers enough to go in, and obviously I blame the leadership too, because they're the leaders. They're the ones with the intelligence. They're the ones that should do the right thing when we, the people, are less smart and less capable than they are. And even if something was not popular back then, it should have been done. So it's an upsetting situation, of course. I'm upset at the huge mistakes we've made at the Shalit deal, at the disengagement of Gaza, at the Oslo Accords, all the things that build up to it, and also about just the way that we we thought that we can live by a terrorist organization, and who, like, what was the plan? How are we ever going to get out of this? It was basically just wait until something like this happens, or until World War III breaks out and new world order is created. But it seems like there wasn't any plan to actually, and there were people talking about it. I think in 2021, Smotrich was talking about conquering Gaza. Now the thing is, you can talk and talk, but we needed people to make actions, and they didn't. And on the military side, you saw how the generals were just way too full of themselves. They felt like we'll just put a fence and dig a hole, and then we're safe. And they were just talking about, we need less soldiers and make the army smaller, and our threats are actually the democracy, and make up all these scary.
Climate change.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think Khalifa was caught saying like the biggest threat to Israel is climate change. It's
Do you know
not
that I actually spoke to someone who met with elected officials in the years prior to, actually not elected officials, met with army officials in the years prior to October 7th, and that appeared on a presentation that
yeah, yeah,
climate change
yeah. But
was a
again,
threat to national security of the state of Israel, on
it's
par with Hezbollah or even above.
yeah. But okay, do you get upset at someone who is just wrong, but innocently wrong because that's just what they happen to think, and then they're doing what they think is right? So
Well,
maybe.
here's my take on this. If you want to work at Starbucks and suck at your job, and everyone returns their drink, you probably will get fired. But at the end of the day, as long as you're not giving someone milk when they're allergic to dairy, you're not going to kill them, God forbid. If you want to be a leader of the IDF and have the security of Jewish people and the state of Israel on your shoulders, and you want to have a driver and a backup driver and all that comes with it, there has to be a accountability mechanism to have some sort of judgment and to say this is right or wrong, and actually have to hang your hat on it and not just run away from it. To me,
Right.
that's very frustrating. It's not the
So
same
yeah,
thing
I agree. I
because you
think
get a
like what I'm
pension, you get a driver, you're running
Yeah, I think
around.
what I'm like the point I'm coming at is like, am I upset that their ideals were wrong? That's not the point. The point is more, for example, okay, you have certain ideals, certain things you believe in, they're wrong. But then comes someone like Ofer Winter who disagrees with you, but he's a great general and he's a great commander and everyone appreciates him. And the reason he's not continuing is just because he politically you don't identify with him and you don't want him to have any control over what's happening. You don't have the right to do that as a general in the army. You need to be professional. You need to be here to protect the Jewish people, and you need to make sure that you actually bring people who think differently. And what happened there, that all the friends brought their friends and they made sure that no one who thinks a little differently doesn't enter the thinking rooms of the high generals. That gets me angry because that's breaking the rules, that's arrogance, that's not understanding your place, and that's something that gets me angry. Also, the behavior, just being on vacation in Eilat when something like this is going down, it doesn't seem like a serious general who 24/7 should just be thinking like, who can hurt an Israeli today, and what am I doing to stop it? Like that's not what's going on in your head when at 3 in the morning they're telling you that this and this came up and you decide to continue sleeping or to wait until later on. You're just way too full of yourself. You think you know everything. You think no one can beat your genius plans. No one can, you know the enemy, and you know his next steps, and that's not the kind of people that can be in the army and lead you.
What's your thought on a national commission of inquiry and the hesitation thus far? Do you think that it should be of high priority, or do you think that it's something that can justifiably be pushed off?
What do you mean by
For instance,
National Commission of
so
Inquiry?
the requests, I know that the many of the parents of the women who were murdered in Nachalos, yes. So what do you think that it should be done? Do you think that it should be done internally in the army?
Yeah, I think it's very
What's your feeling
simple.
about it?
I think obviously we all deserve to know the truth. That's the bottom line. That's like the source that we all need to start from. And then the question is, how are we all going to know the truth the best? So we need to get someone who, whatever they say, we're all going to agree before they already start looking into it that this is someone we all trust. And
Well,
I
that's not going
think
to happen in
that
Israel. You can't even get.
so I think there have been ideas like this, and I think this is not bad. I deserve to know the truth, just like a family member of someone who thinks completely differently than me deserves to know the truth. And I think that at some point, if we can't come to an agreement, then there should be two commissions, and one commission that of people that whatever that think a certain way, and one commission of people from a different political view. If we can't come to just a group of people who we all agree of, which can obviously be made up of different representatives, but basically I'm not even against having two, because I just want the truth to be out there. At the end, everyone's going to believe what they want to believe and not believe what they don't want to believe. But if you don't give me an option to see the truth in the first place, like if it doesn't even exist out there for me to see, like I'll just give you practical examples. What they want to do is the Vadat Chakira Mamlachtit. It's appointed by the judges from the Beit Mishpat Elyon. Now, the judges have been a huge political player in the last. There's no doubt about it. No one's going to go out and say the judges. They're not in the political game. They're completely outside. It's a known thing. And if they're going to go and appoint someone, I just don't have any confidence. Even if this is not true, I just don't have confidence that any of their conclusions will be the judges were not good when they did this and this. The judges had too much power. The Beit Mishpat should have stepped down on this in this case, and they didn't. Like even if they were perfect, I don't have confidence that's going to come up, because they obviously have skin in the game. I want something to come and be outside of the system and be able to come up with the truth. So I'm against having one commission that is appointed by the judges.
Here's my
If we
request.
can't
Here's my
come,
request.
yeah,
I think you're onto something, and people that are proposing it. Part of the reason I started doing this podcast and actually having people on that were on the ground and involved in that, I think that the testimony and the investigations actually have to be public, not just the conclusions, but when people say something, they have to be accountable for their words. And I understand that you might have to block a few things out that are still of national security consequence, but there's so much smoke and mirrors going on where people, they just say, oh, national security, we can't talk about it.
yeah,
So they hide behind these things. So I've been focused on helmets, right? I've been focused on protective equipment for soldiers. And we've made basic requests. Okay, give us the last 10, 15 years of purchases that you've made for helmets, because it's a mathematical question of how many helmets are even in the Army. And, issue of national concern. Do you think we're going to be able to tell you that? It's not an issue of national concern at all, because if you just tell us what you actually purchased, it's in the past, and that way we can figure it out for the future. It's not going to all of a sudden retroactively give someone a security advantage in 2017, right? So that kind of thinking, though, just blocks real inquiry.
yeah.
And I think that the ability for people to hide in these commissions is a bigger issue even than who's the final judge. Because if they want to offer their conclusions, that's fine. Everyone can have a different opinion of the movie. But we have to be able to read the script. And that's what I'm mostly concerned about, because there's all of these crazy things that went on. And even if the result is the result. So you're not going to bring anyone back except for the coming of Mashiach immediately, speedily in our days. But the reading of this script is not going to do that. So it's one of these things where the smoke and mirrors of security blocks a lot of the fair inquiry, in my mind.
Yeah, I think the assumption has to be that there's very powerful people who have a lot to lose with the different conclusions that will come out of this, and they're going to do a lot in their power and with their power to make sure that they come out in a good light, and that's just needs to be an assumption, and then
Well,
we
they
have
need
to.
to they need to know that they've already lost. That's not. It's not even a
Right,
matter
but
of.
I'm sure they're still going to do whatever they can, and they're doing it. Like you see now, there's coming up now on the news all the time, like that the Ramatkal doesn't want to. He's sending a recorder and another person from his lishka to every single meeting to make sure that certain,
It sounds
everything
like
that's
Tony
said
Soprano.
is
It's
yeah,
really crazy.
and the Mevakir Medina is telling him, look, if you continue like this, I'm going to have to take action, and take action that I haven't taken until now to make sure that you stop trying to scare or do these kind of things that make it look like you're trying to hide something from the public.
Well, they are
Um,
trying to hide something from the public.
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure. And it's obviously not only him. I'm sure there's a lot of different people, and I think, one thing I know that's happening is that family members of hostages and of people who were killed are pushing now to be part of the commission and they'll have access to the information just like everyone else. And if this kind of thing happens, then that restores trust in what's happening. Um, yeah, at the end, I don't think there's gonna come out like maybe there will, who knows, but that there's someone, some information that this and this guy he completely caused the whole October 7th. It's all his fault, and look at this
No,
and this
that's
story,
that's
whatever.
not that's not possible.
I think we all know 99% of it. Like that's also kind of what I'm assuming. We're smart enough. We've seen enough. We heard enough. We know the general idea. It's not so hard. You can put it like it's not rocket science, right? Like we believe that they were not going to attack us. We believe that they were training for defense. We were stupid. They did attack us. Why were we stupid? Because we all thought the same way. Because we were very confident in ourselves. Because it didn't make sense for them to attack us, and so on. Okay, and that's like 99% of it. And then, why did we not tell the prime minister that things were happening? Because we don't like the prime minister, and because we were elected by the previous government in a non-democratic way to make sure that this government would not have control of the army or whatever you want to go. So it's all kind of clear, and at the end of the day, what we're going to learn from this, I'll be surprised if it's anything too interesting.
Well, I think it's important that the people that were active in formulating such a horrendous doctrine are not influencing future doctrines, and
100%,
that's and
100%. And
that's
that's why
why
it
it's
has
very
to
important.
happen, and it has to happen fast because you can see already now they're trying to appoint the next chief of whatever and general of whatever, and you can't let that happen before we know were you
But
the
then
cause of
again, like
this.
think about the opposition in politics, right? Like Benny Gantz, who's one of the architects of all these things that went so wrong on October 7th. The whole vision. I mean, just a month before, he's promoting about how we have more work permits for Gazans to enter
Yeah,
Israel. This is a grand achievement behind the Aviv Kochavi border fence and all these things.
yeah,
Why are these people taken seriously in public as leaders? They everything they touch turned to garbage, and that needs to be seen through in these kinds of reviews. And there has to just be accountability where there has to be some level of shame, perhaps, and just saying, I really was wrong, and
yeah.
perhaps I'm not the best person to be in charge.
Yeah, the way I see it, like I think 30%. What you see happening now is half the people are going to complain like, "Oh, look, Bibi wasn't responsible. He needs to go home," and then the other half will complain, "Oh, look, Hiltzi and look at Gadi Eisenkot and look at Benny Gantz and their responsibilities for the army, and they have to go." And then what you see from that is like people just care more that their political view stays put. They don't care how wrong they were. They don't care how deep in the conception and how blind it was, like to be continue promoting Gadia, and I've heard many people to continue promoting Gadi Eisenkot after his part in this, as if he's some savior and the guy that knew all along. It's completely like, yeah, and the same thing about Bibi. Like I think he does many things very well, but at the end of the day, he was the man on top of everything for 15 years, and what happened, he can give excuses from now until forever that the people weren't with him, no one understood. You need to be the smart guy. You need to be the first guy to step up and do what needs to be done. Just like Begin, or just like all the Ben Gurion. They did it before people knew how critical what they did was, and just always going by what the majority wants and likes to hear to get reelected is not something that's okay, especially when something like this happens. And I don't think he was the direct cause for this. I think he's far from the direct cause, but he's definitely part of this huge failure. There's no doubt about it.
And the other thing is
And
that as information is coming out, about, or I should say, as information is being leaked to Ronen Bergman about the Mossad and how intertwined they were with Hezbollah's day-to-day operation, being able to track missile movements and the walkie-talkies and the beepers, right? If the leadership knew that they basically had Hezbollah under control, according to what they're leaking to Ronen Bergman, then it really doesn't make any sense why they wouldn't have more aggressively gone after Hamas, because they so
Yeah, Hamas
again,
was never seen as a strategic threat. Hezbollah was seen as a threat to the continuity of the state of Israel, and Hamas was
right. But
just
what I'm saying is it was promoted as the threat to the continuity of the state of Israel, even though according to what the Mossad is now saying, they knew that they could disarm them very quickly because of all these ways that they'd infiltrated. So it's their
right.
their own their own claim undermines why they would be lacking of any sort of awareness of the fact that they had lacking quote unquote human intelligence in Gaza.
Right. Yeah, look, there were many, many issues. And when you have complex systems like this, which are responsible for the lives of the entire country, then you can never leave it up to one point of failure. And
Yeah, of
there were
course.
way too many red lights. And yeah, it could be. And I see some of these things coming out like, oh, and this came up and they didn't do anything. Like, you know what? Okay, maybe they shouldn't have done anything because really that doesn't mean a lot alone. But when you connect all the dots and the behavior of the generals, you can see a very, very straight line and some very, very limited thinking and limited self-questioning. And that is the issue. That and then many, many red flags come up, but there's only one chief of staff that knows what everyone else is under him is knows and can connect the dots. And if he chooses not to pass it on top, he's really stopping it at himself. And and that's the issue. And yeah, of course, I hope that different generals would step up and say, no, I'm not letting this happen. And I think that's kind of what shows that there's too much of the same kind of thinking throughout the entire army leadership. But that's what needs to change. You need to always have people that are questioning the system, that are thinking differently, and then you can be more resilient to these kind of failures. Because Hamas is smart. Like, if I'm Sinwar, like, let's go back a little bit, and think, how are we going to attack Israel? And, all you have to do is train, okay? And by the way, a year and a half ago, and I'm going to get back to this in a second, what a year and a half ago they already knew. But all you have to do is train to do this assault and come all the way to the gate and go back home. Come all the way to the gate and go back home. And track what the IDF is doing in response. And it's like the boy who cried wolf. Like, enough times you do this and you see that the IDF is doing nothing. One time you say, okay, this time it's for real. And then it's too late. The IDF can't do anything. So it's not about as much October 7th not seeing it as like, why did you let these people train to assault, and why did you literally had their plans in your hand and you said, no, this is not realistic, they're not going to do it. That's also part of it. And the fact that you let them train for this and you didn't go in a preemptive strike and just say, I'm not letting you train to conquer all of southern Israel, that's, to me, almost as bad of a failure as not seeing it as a day of. Because what do you expect? If you're letting them train for it, they're smart. They know how to see if we're moving airplanes closer, if we're putting helicopters in the air, if we're bringing more. They know everything. They have telescopes. They have people inside. They have the people you brought it up. The people working in Israel that are tracking our bases, whatever, and they can tell if we're onto them or not. And that's also part of why. All I'm saying is from the news. It's everyone can know this if they just read the news. It's also a year and a half before this whole attack. So I think it was Finkelman himself, who was Aluf Picud Daom now, if I'm not mistaken, him himself, but it may be someone in a position like his, who said, okay, there's two ways this operation of theirs, which they called Chomat Yericho, can succeed. And one of them is we will think they are training when they're not. And the other one is something to do with like we will think that they just want to doing things for economical reasons when they're actually doing it to attack. And like they said that year and a half ago, they knew it, and then they fell for it themselves. So sometimes you outsmart yourself, and that's also kind of what happened. So I think, but by the way, I think look, I'm seeing it at least when we're talking to the Sarah Bitachon, to Israel Katz, and And to people in the Knesset, the feeling I'm getting is that things changed forever. We're not going back to October 6th. We understand that we're not going to leave Syria up to jihadists to decide when they're attacking us, and we're not going to leave Lebanon up to Hezbollah to attack us. And you see how the second Lebanon war, for example, ended in a certain way, and the third Lebanon war definitely is far from ending, and definitely not how the second Lebanon war did. So things have changed, and
Well,
what
as
drives
long as
me
they don't give
crazy.
in to American demands.
Yeah, which drives me crazy. So you have to be smart about it, and I think Israel is, putting those 60-day ceasefire and checking when those 60 days exactly end. When you connect the dots, you understand it's okay. Biden says, "I'm not going to give you weapons. I'm not going to give you things," and it really limits you. But playing around it, and thank God Trump winning and enabling us to win the wars now because not having America against us. At least be neutral and just continue supplying us weapons as we need and pay for or whatever. So, anyways, I think things are changing, and yeah, what drove me crazy, like I don't know, personally, I think the way Gallant has been acting and the way
By the way,
Hiltzi is acting, right?
I have him on my shirt. You know why I have him on my shirt?
Yeah, I see him.
Why? Because he's in Gaza wearing a helmet from Marom Delphine after
Huh?
the Ministry of Defense said that Marom Delphine helmets are not safe. Obviously, they were safe. They're level 3A according to the NIJ standard and tested. But the Ministry of Defense just said, nope, they're not safe.
And then he went in with one.
And then he's wearing one
Yeah,
in Gaza while soldiers have to fundraise with Paybox and Israel Gives and all these other things and reaching out to us, Unit 11741. And he has the chutzpah to go into Gaza while the soldiers that are clearing the way don't even have proper helmets.
yeah,
So we put it on a shirt. So people come up to me and say, "Whoa, you're a big Gallant fan." I said, "Oh no, he needs to be remembered for this." So I have
yeah.
one for every leader that went into Gaza or Lebanon
Oh,
wearing
nice.
safe equipment. Yeah, it's not good behavior. It's not good behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, so anyways, I just finished what I was saying. So, um, I feel like they're stuck in October. Like anyone who says we can move, we need to find someone to replace Hamas. It needs to be the Palestinian Authority or whatever. They're just not seeing a step forward. They're not understanding the conception that you can't give guns to your enemy, to your sworn enemy, who is
Oh,
not
the
going to
pay
stop
for
until they.
slay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, that drives me crazy. But I think slowly, slowly, it's looking better and better. We're moving forward. Not fast enough, but
God willing, people will continue to push and have these conversations. And I think that the only way to ensure that we don't go back to a pre October 7th reality is for people to keep stepping up and actually engaging in the ideas and not being scared or backing away from it and saying, oh, they must have it under control. I think that, again, I'm going to go back to equipment because that's where I've been focused. People would say, there's no way that the IDF is sending soldiers in with subpar equipment. The fact of the matter is, they are. And it might not be, there are some elite units that have better equipment than others, but there's a standard problem, and we are not going to shut up until the standard problem is fixed because I don't want another Jewish life destroyed and a family broken because of a stupid equipment issue. And we will not shut up until it's taken care of because it's not hard, and let's just get a solution. And whether that's national security or domestic thing, it's important that people just continue to engage on it because sometimes, as we saw on October 7th, sometimes the people in charge don't really have it under control, and it requires civilian engagement, even from the other side of the world. Before we wrap up here, what's one thing from Yosef's life that can increase or improve the quality of life for someone watching right now?
I think always caring for others. There's the pasuk of Yosef in Parashat Vayeshev, must be, where he's searching for his brothers, and he says, "Itachai anochi mevakesh." And later on, his brothers end up uh, selling him to Egypt and throwing him in the hole and selling him to Egypt. And I think in a way, that whole story for me is is the story of Yosef in many ways, because Yosef always unconditionally was looking just to help, no matter what. He didn't care. There was no conditions. He was never thinking, okay, I'm gonna get this, or only if the country does so and so, then I'll serve or whatever. He was just there to do what needs to be done to protect anyone who he can protect. And Kfar Aza, he went down. He protected um, anyone who was there. It was Israeli, Jewish, under his responsibility, and he did his job. And his friends always said that he was always the first guy to help, always putting himself before others, others before himself. And yeah, okay, the story of afterwards the brothers selling him, that kind of just displays like it's sometimes you don't get it in return. Sometimes you're gonna get thrown down the stairs. They're gonna kick you out. They're not gonna return any favors, and they're only gonna use you and laugh at you. But be true to yourself. Be true to what you believe in, and do good regardless. And at the end, the truth wins. So just keep strong and keep going.
His neshama shav and aliyah, and I look forward to more people hearing about his legacy. And if you, I guess we'll, a little bit of an addendum here. There's a few specific projects that you and Sinai and your family have been working on, and that are going on. If you send them to me, we'll include them in the show notes so that people can check it out and see how they can contribute to certain projects that are being done in his memory. And we'll continue to promote a legacy of kindness and doing amazing things for other people just because it's the right thing to do.
Amen. Thank you very much.